The morning of my college graduation, I stood outside the auditorium in my cap and gown, phone in hand, checking the same thread over and over. My mother had texted at 6 a.m., running a little behind, save us 4 seats. That was 3 hours ago. The ceremony started at 10. It was now 9:52. I scanned every face coming through the double doors. Strangers in blazers. Grandparents with cameras. Little kids dragging their parents by the hand. I watched a girl about my age get swept into a hug by a woman who looked just like her, both of them crying before they even said a word. I looked back at my phone. Nothing. When they called my name Claire Elizabeth Morrow, summa cum laude, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, I walked across that stage alone. No one in the crowd cheered my name, no camera flash from the third row. Just the dean's handshake, the rolled diploma, and the long walk back to my seat, while everyone else's family screamed from the bleachers. I told myself it was fine. I told myself they probably got stuck in traffic on I-95. I told myself a lot of things that day. I should have known better. I'd been telling myself those same things my whole life. Growing up, my mother ran our house the way a general runs a base. Every decision filtered through her. Every plan required her approval. My father didn't contradict her, he just disappeared into his workshop whenever things got tense, which was often. My brother Ryan was 2 years older than me, and had always been my mother's favorite, in the way that was never spoken out loud but was understood by everyone in the room. He got the longer hugs, the louder praise, the benefit of the doubt. I got the checklist. Maintain a 4. Don't embarrass this family. Be home by 10. Don't make noise about things that don't concern you. For most of my childhood, I followed those rules because I didn't know there was another option. It wasn't until I got a full scholarship to the University of Virginia that I understood the rules had never been about me at all. They'd been about keeping me close enough to control. My mother cried when I told her about the scholarship. Not the proud kind of crying, the other kind. UVA is 4 hours away, she said. I know, I said. That's part of it. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that. When she finally did, she had reframed the whole thing in her mind. I was going to UVA because she had raised me to be ambitious. It was her success. She told everyone at church. I let her have it. I just needed to get out. Those 4 years in Charlottesville were the first time I understood what it felt like to breathe. I made real friends. I fell in love with nursing in a way I hadn't expected, the ICU rotations especially. The way everything slowed down and sharpened at the same time. The way you had to be completely present because someone's life depended on it. I was good at it. My professors told me I was good at it. For the first time in my life, I believed the people telling me that. I called home every Sunday. My mother talked mostly about Ryan, his job, his apartment in Richmond, his girlfriend Melissa. I listened and asked the right questions and kept my own news small. It was easier that way, less to defend. I met Daniel in my junior year. He was getting his master's in civil engineering, quiet in a way that felt like steadiness rather than absence. On our third date, he asked me what I wanted, and I didn't mean for it to happen, but I started crying, not because it was a hard question, because nobody had ever asked it before. By the time graduation came around, Daniel and I had been together almost 2 years. He drove up from Richmond, where he'd just started a job, just to watch me walk across that stage. He was there at 9:30, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers, waiting outside the auditorium. My family was not. I found out later they'd gone to brunch first. My mother had wanted to try a place in Alexandria she'd seen on Instagram. They figured the ceremony wouldn't start on time. Ryan had agreed with her, the way Ryan always agreed with her. My father had driven. They arrived at 10:47, 17 minutes after I'd already crossed the stage. My mother texted me from the parking lot. "We're here. Where are you sitting?" I didn't respond. Daniel found me outside afterward, still in my gown, sitting on a low stone wall with my diploma in my lap. He didn't say anything. He just sat down next to me and handed me the sunflowers. "They missed it," I said. "I know," he said. "I saw. I don't want to talk to them right now." "Okay," he said. "You don't have to." That was the moment I understood something I'd been circling for years. I didn't have to. I actually didn't have to do any of the things I'd been doing out of obligation and fear and the slow-burning hope that one day they would show up the way families were supposed to show up. I could just not. The realization was so simple, it felt like stepping off a curb I'd been dreading and finding the ground right there, solid, 2 inches down. My mother called 6 times that evening. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened, the messages moved in a very predictable arc. Confused, then defensive, then wounded, then angry. By the 6th one, she was telling me I was being dramatic, and that missing 17 minutes of a ceremony didn't mean they'd missed my graduation, and that I needed to grow up. I deleted all 6 without responding. Daniel and I got engaged the following spring. He proposed on a Saturday morning in our apartment kitchen. No grand gesture, just him on one knee with a ring his grandmother had left him, asking me if I wanted to build a life together. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I told my mother over the phone. There was a pause. "When's the date?" she said. "We're thinking next October." Another pause. "That's not much time to plan." "It's 14 months, I said. "I'll need to be involved," she said. "This is a family event." I kept my voice even. "We'll definitely keep you in the loop." What followed was 14 months of my mother inserting herself into every decision: the venue, the flowers, the guest list, the seating chart. When I pushed back, she went through Ryan. When Ryan pushed back on my behalf, she cried. When she cried, my father called me to smooth things over, speaking in that low, careful voice he used when he was trying to keep the temperature down. It was exhausting in the precise way that living inside her orbit had always been exhausting, not explosive, just relentless. A slow leak. 3 weeks before the wedding, I told her we weren't including her college roommate on the guest list. We had a hard cap of 80 people and I didn't know the woman. My mother said that was disrespectful. I said I was sorry she felt that way. She hung up. The next morning my father called. His voice had a different quality this time, not the smoothing over voice, something harder underneath it. "Your mother is very hurt," he said. "I understand," I said. "She's been planning this wedding in her head since you were a little girl." "It's my wedding," I said. "Mine and Daniel's. That's a very selfish way to look at it." I held the phone for a moment. Outside the window, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the yard. A normal sound on a normal morning while my father told me I was selfish for wanting my own wedding to be mine. "I have to go," I said. "I have a shift," he called back twice. I didn't pick up. 2 days before the wedding, my mother sent a text to me, Daniel, his mother, and his aunt a group message, which she had never done before, which meant she wanted witnesses. The text said she had been excluded from the planning process, that her feelings had been dismissed, and that she needed more time before she could participate in a celebration that didn't reflect her family's values. She said she hoped I would reach out so we could resolve things before Saturday. It was a Thursday. I read the message 3 times. Daniel read it over my shoulder without saying anything. His mother, who was a retired school principal from Roanoke, and not a woman who frightened easily, texted back, "We'll see you Saturday. Claire looks beautiful." That was it. I loved her for that. I called my mother back. She let it go to voicemail. I left a message. I told her the wedding was at 11 on Saturday at Hartwell Farm in Staunton. I told her we had saved her a seat in the front row. I told her I hoped she would come. I told her I loved her. Then I hung up, and I did not call again, because I had said everything there was to say, and calling again would only be asking her permission to get married, which I was not willing to do. Saturday came. Daniel's family filled the front 2 rows on the right. His mother in a blue dress, his aunt from Charlotte, his college roommates who had driven 8 hours from Boston. The left side was less full. My 3 closest friends from nursing school, my supervisor from the hospital, who had become something like a mentor, an older couple from our church who had known me since I was small. Daniel's aunt had quietly moved to my side so it wouldn't look so sparse. I noticed and I didn't say anything, and I will never forget that she did that. The music started. There was no one to walk me down the aisle. I stood at the back of the barn, holding my bouquet of white dahlias, and for a moment I just breathed. The room smelled like cedar and late summer flowers, and outside the Blue Ridge was doing what it does in October, all rust and amber and the kind of stillness that feels intentional. Daniel was at the end of that aisle looking at me like I was the only thing in the room. I walked toward him. Every step was mine. My dress, my pace, my choice. The absence of my family behind me was real, and it hurt in a specific quiet way. I don't have a good word for not grief exactly, more like the feeling of a door closing on a room you'd spent years trying to get right. But the room in front of me was full of people who had shown up. That was real too. The ceremony was 20 minutes. When the officiant said we could kiss, Daniel's mother let out a whoop that echoed off the rafters and the whole room laughed, and that sound, that specific sound, lived in me for days afterward. We danced until 9. My friend Priya gave a toast that made everyone cry. Daniel's college roommate gave one that made everyone laugh so hard, the barn coordinator came in to check on us. We ate good food and drank good wine, and somewhere around 8 o'clock, standing on the edge of the dance floor with my husband's hand in mine, I understood that this was enough. More than enough. This was exactly what a wedding was supposed to be. My family sent no message that day. Not my mother. Not my father. Not Ryan. We came home from our honeymoon on a Tuesday. By Thursday I had a voicemail from my father. His voice was back to the smooth, careful register, the temperature management voice. But there was something strained underneath it now. "We'd like to see you," he said. "We'd like to try to move past this." I didn't call back that day. Or the next. The following Monday, I came home from a 12-hour ICU shift to find a text from my mother. Not about the wedding. Not about the silence. A new thing entirely. Ryan and Melissa are getting married in June. They need some help with costs. We're asking family to contribute. We think $9,500 is a fair ask from you given your nursing salary. Let us know. I read it twice. Then I read it to Daniel, who was standing in the kitchen making pasta, and who stopped stirring and turned around and looked at me. $9,500, he said. Yes. From us. Yes. After they didn't come to our wedding, I set the phone down on the counter. I opened the cabinet. I got out 2 wine glasses. I poured. "I'm going to think about how I want to respond to this," I said. I thought about it for 4 days. I talked to Daniel about it. I talked to Priya about it. I did not talk to my mother or father about it. On the 5th day, I sent my mother a text message. It said, "I hope Ryan and Melissa have a beautiful wedding. I've sent a gift." Then I sent Ryan a Venmo payment for $1 with the note, "Best wishes." I put my phone face down on the nightstand and went to sleep. What happened next took me by surprise. Although looking back, I'm not sure why. I had grown up with these people. I knew how they operated. I knew that when my mother felt she had been embarrassed, the response was not conversation. The response was escalation. 3 days after the Venmo, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let it go. That evening, while Daniel and I were eating dinner, there was a knock at the front door. It was a police officer. He was polite. He had a calm face and a calm voice, and he said he'd received a report of a financial dispute involving property that may have been taken from a family home without consent. He said he wasn't making any accusations, just needed to ask a few questions. He said my father had reported that several items of value jewelry, specifically, had gone missing from my childhood home, and that the family believed I may have taken them when I last visited. I stood in my doorway in my socks. "I haven't been to my parents' home in over a year," I said. "I understand," he said. "I just need to document the conversation. Do you have any items that belong to the family?" I thought about the one thing I had. My grandmother's pearl earrings. My grandmother, my mother's mother, had given them to me directly. Sitting in the kitchen of her house in Harrisonburg 3 years before she passed, pressing them into my palm and saying, "These are for you, Claire, not the drawer, not the box, for you." I had a photo of that moment on my phone. My grandmother was smiling. I was 22. I showed the officer the photo. He looked at it for a long moment. He asked if I had anything in writing, any record of the gift. I didn't have anything in writing, but I had the photo, and I had my grandmother's neighbor who had been present that day, and I had approximately zero intention of returning my grandmother's earrings to a woman who had not come to my wedding. The officer took my information. He was kind about it. Before he left, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read and said, "These things are complicated, I know." Then he left. I closed the door. Daniel was standing in the hallway. His face was very still. "They called the police," I said. "Yes," he said. "About earrings my grandmother gave me." "Yes." I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway, back against the wall, and I started laughing. Not because it was funny. Because there was nothing else to do with it. Because somewhere in the journey of the last 2 years, I had passed through grief and anger and exhaustion and come out in a place where the only honest response to my mother sending police to my door over a pair of pearl earrings was to sit on my own hallway floor and laugh until my eyes watered. Daniel slid down the wall and sat next to me. "What do you want to do?" he said. "I want to block all of them," I said. "Every number, every account, all of it. Right now." "Okay," he said. "And I want to call a lawyer tomorrow." "Also okay," he said. "And I want Thai food." "I'll order it right now," he said. I blocked my mother, my father, and Ryan that night. I sent a brief letter through an attorney friend the following week, documenting the provenance of the earrings and noting that any further contact through law enforcement regarding false claims would be met with a formal response. I never heard from the police again. For a while, the silence felt strange. I kept reaching for my phone on Sunday mornings out of muscle memory, that old weekly call routine. I kept having the impulse to tell my mother things: a good shift at work, a new recipe, the fact that Daniel and I had started looking at houses in the West End. The impulse would rise and then I would remember, and the remembering felt different each time, sometimes like relief, sometimes like a small ache in a place I couldn't quite locate. I threw myself into work. The ICU had a way of recalibrating everything. You couldn't stay inside your own drama for long when the person in bed 4 needed you present and sharp and all the way there. My colleagues became my people, in the way that shared intensity makes people your people. We covered each other's shifts and brought each other coffee and stood in the break room at 2 in the morning talking about things you can only say to someone who's been in the same rooms you've been in. Priya got me into therapy. Not dramatically, just by mentioning her own therapist so many times that I finally made an appointment. My therapist was a woman in her 50s who had a plant on every surface of her office and who did not let me get away with anything. She helped me name some things I'd been carrying for a long time: the way I'd learned to make myself small to avoid my mother's corrections, the way I'd equated love with endurance, the way I'd spent years trying to earn something that was never going to be given the way I needed it to be given. It was slow work, and sometimes it was hard, and I kept going back every week. Life moved forward the way it does. Daniel and I bought the house. A 1940s brick colonial in the West End, with a backyard that needed work, and a kitchen that was smaller than we wanted, and a front porch where we ate dinner in the summer evenings and watched the neighborhood go by. We planted tomatoes. We got a dog, a retriever mix from the county shelter named Biscuit, who destroyed one throw pillow and then decided to behave. We had friends over on Saturdays. It was a quiet life, and it was ours, and it fit. I was 31 when my father called from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Something made me pick up, some instinct I couldn't explain, a pull I didn't fully understand. His voice was different. All the register was gone from it. He sounded smaller than I had ever heard him sound. "Claire," he said. "It's Dad." I sat down. He told me he had been diagnosed 8 months ago. Pancreatic. He said he hadn't wanted to tell me, that my mother had advised against it, that he had gone back and forth about it for months. He said he was sorry it had taken him this long. He said there were things he needed to say and he was running out of time to say them. I sat in my kitchen with my hand flat on the table and listened to my father's voice, which had always been the voice of negotiation and management and careful navigation, crack open. He said he knew he had failed me, not in the way people say that as a placeholder. He named specific things. The graduation, the way he had let my mother's version of events become the family's version. The phone call where he told me I was selfish. The police. He said that last one like he could barely get it out. "I am so ashamed of that," he said. "I need you to know that. Whatever else you think of me, I need you to know I am ashamed of that." I didn't say anything for a moment. "Why did you let it happen?" I asked. Not angry. I was past the anger by then. Just genuinely asking. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I checked to make sure the call was still connected. "Because it was easier," he said finally. "Because I didn't know how to be a different kind of man inside that marriage. Because I told myself it wasn't that bad, over and over, until I almost believed it." He paused. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to hear me say it." I looked out the window at the backyard. The tomatoes had come in well this year. "I hear you," I said. I visited him twice in the months that followed. My mother was there both times. She was different, quieter, diminished somehow, the certainty gone out of her in a way that made her look older. We didn't talk about the wedding or the earrings or the Venmo or the police. We sat in the living room and we talked about small things, the garden, his nurses, an old movie he'd rewatched. It wasn't reconciliation exactly. It was something more cautious than that. The door cracked open, light coming through the edge. He passed on a Thursday in late March. I was with him. My mother was on one side and I was on the other, and Ryan was at the foot of the bed. And for that hour we were just a family in a room together, which was the simplest and most complete thing we had ever managed to be. I gave the eulogy. I talked about the workshop, the way he smelled like sawdust, the way he'd taught me to drive in an empty parking lot in Charlottesville on a Sunday morning, laughing when I braked too hard. I talked about the phone call. I didn't explain it to the room. I didn't need to. I just said that in the last chapter of his life, my father found his way to honesty, and that it mattered, and that I was grateful I had picked up the phone. There was a reception afterward at my parents' house. I helped set out the food and I talked to relatives I hadn't seen in years. Ryan and I stood on the back porch at some point, side by side, looking out at the yard. "I'm sorry," he said. He didn't specify what for. He didn't need to. "I know," I said. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't the movie version where everyone hugs, and the past dissolves, and the family is fixed. Real families don't fix that cleanly, but it was a beginning of something that might, in time, become something else. I was open to that. Carefully, slowly, on terms I got to set. I was open. On the drive home, Daniel reached over and put his hand over mine. "You okay?" he asked. I thought about it honestly. "Yeah," I said. "Actually, yeah." The Blue Ridge was doing its thing again, late afternoon light hitting the ridgeline. That particular gold that only happens in spring and fall. The kind that makes you pull over sometimes just to look. I didn't pull over, but I looked. There are things I know now that I didn't know the morning I walked into that auditorium alone. Diploma waiting with my name on it. Family parking the car 3 towns over. I know that showing up is a choice, and that the people who make it are worth more than obligation ever produced. I know that the silence after you stop waiting for someone to show up is hard at first, and then it becomes spacious room for the right things to grow into. I know that my father was a complicated man who failed me in specific ways and loved me in other ways, and that both of those things can be true at the same time, and that holding both without needing to resolve it into something simpler is its own kind of growing up. I know that Daniel ordered Thai food that night on the hallway floor, and that Biscuit ate a spring roll off my plate, and that I laughed again, the real kind, and that the house was warm and the life was mine. That's the part I come back to. The life was mine.